What's up, everybody? I'm Mckenty. This is my second channel, and this is your home for my Twitch highlights and my podcast. So if you like this and you want to see more of that and you want to join the live streams, there's a link to that in the description of this video. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the news making the rounds today. Neil Young taking a big old L from The Hollywood Reporter. Spotify to pull Neil Young's music after the artist's objections to Joe Rogan. The artist is expected to lose 60% of his streaming revenue by pulling his catalog off of Spotify. Spotify is in the process of removing Neil Young's catalog of music from its service after the artist published, then took down an open letter with an ultimatum: deal with the vaccine misinformation coming from Joe Rogan's podcast or lose Young's music. Basically what he said was, you know, Joe Rogan is spreading misinformation about COVID on his podcast. You got to choose between him or me. You got to pick between one of us. And Spotify said, well, all right. We choose him, and they took all his music off, or they're in the process of removing it. 2 days after the letter was published, Spotify is now in the process of removing Young's music from the streaming service, a Spotify spokesperson told The Hollywood Reporter. We want all the world's music and audio content to be available to Spotify users. With that comes great responsibility in balancing both safety for listeners and freedom for creators. We have detailed content policies in place, and we've removed over 20,000 podcast episodes related to COVID since the start of that pandemic. We regret Neil's decision to remove his music from Spotify, but hope to welcome him back soon. In his letter, which was originally published on his website January 24th, Young said, "I am doing this because Spotify is spreading fake information about vaccines, potentially causing death to those who believe the disinformation being spread by them. They can have Rogan or Young, not both." In a follow-up letter published on Wednesday, Young said that Spotify represented 60% of his streaming revenue globally, which amounted to a huge loss for his record company to absorb, but that he moved forward with removing his catalog because he could not continue to support Spotify's life-threatening misinformation to the music-loving public. I will give you my thoughts on this in 1 second. First, I wanted to share this, which I thought was kind of funny. David Draymond, I like this guy. He seems like a thoughtful, smart, intelligent guy, and here's what he had to say. I agree with it. Today, in a tweet directed at Spotify founder and CEO Daniel Ek, Draymond wrote, "I applaud you and Spotify for making the right call, preserving free speech and not capitulating to the mob. I may not agree with everything Joe Rogan or his guests say, but they're entitled to have the forum to say it," which I agree with. Those are my thoughts as well. I don't really listen to Joe Rogan anymore, but I have listened to his podcast since the very beginning, since 2011 or 2010, whatever it was, a very long time. I'm familiar with Joe Rogan. I know his show. I get it. Like, I know all about it. I have not listened really very much in the past year or two because it is fucking COVID all the goddamn time. It's all he talks about. Every fucking guest turns into Joe talking about the same shit every time. And it is so uninteresting to me. It is so boring to me. I do not care about Joe Rogan's opinions on COVID. By the way, I don't care about fucking Neil Young's opinions on COVID either. I do think it's kind of funny that Neil Young thinks that he is somehow more qualified to talk about COVID than Joe Rogan is. Guess what? Neither one of you are qualified in the slightest. You're not. Neither am I. I make YouTube videos. I run an education company. I don't know anything about vaccines and about COVID. It's not my lane. I actually do think Joe Rogan is spreading COVID misinformation. I agree with that. But here's the thing. The mainstream media has spread COVID misinformation too. WHO has spread COVID misinformation. The CDC has spread COVID misinformation. Lots of people have. He's not the only one. It wouldn't surprise me if Neil Young has either. It's very odd to me that Neil Young sort of chose this as his hill. It's not, well, actually, it's not odd to me. I was going to say it's odd to me that this was the hill he wanted to die on, that this is like the thing that he finally decided he needed to put his foot down on, because let me remind you, other people who are on Spotify include Bill Cosby and R. Kelly. Neil Young doesn't seem to have a problem being on the same platform as those guys, but for some reason, Joe Rogan, who shares, you know, I suppose you could call it misinformation, COVID skeptic shit, whatever. It's strange to me that Neil Young takes such offense to that's where he draws the line. You guys remember Trump derangement syndrome? When Trump got elected, everyone just lost their fucking mind. COVID derangement syndrome is a thing too, on both sides. Joe Rogan has COVID derangement syndrome on the right. You know, Rogan's position is that, like, whatever the mainstream media and whatever the establishment says about COVID must be false for, you know, whatever reason, because that's just how his brain works. And then on the left, there's the opposite. You know, the people get their fucking Fauci bobbleheads and, you know, want everyone to wear 2 masks when they're outside in the park 100 feet from anyone else. Exactly. Like it says in the chat here, it's all virtue signaling at this point. In any case, those are my thoughts on this. The part that I agree with David Draymond on is this. I do not support any artist blackmailing any entity to follow an agenda they believe in, whether it's Neil Young on one side of the spectrum or Eric Clapton on the other. Music shouldn't be used to sow division. It should be used to bring people together, in my humble opinion. And I agree with that. I'm sick of artists, deciding that they are the authorities on what content should appear on any given platform. I'm tired of it. It's exactly what he said. It's blackmailing. It's ultimatums. It's like, do we want to live in a world where every artist just puts their foot down and says, nobody that I disagree with is allowed to be on this platform? I would hope not. The way to fight bad ideas is by talking about them. And there's a limit, hate speech, stuff like that. But I'm tired of these artists, especially people on the left. Actually, that's not true. It's not both sides. In this case, the left are the ones who are far more prone to censorship. Nobody on the right is demanding that anyone be deplatformed. That's really only people on the left that do that these days. But in any case, I think it's dumb. These artists need to just stick to what they do, which is making music. Stop declaring themselves as like the arbiters of science. I think it's hilarious that Neil Young got his bluff called. They said, well, all right, we'll remove your music. No problem, Mr. Young. Because guess what? It's Neil Young. It's not Drake. It's not Kanye. It's Neil Young. It's not going to hurt like Spotify to remove his music from their platform. So he made the mistake of putting his foot down and making an ultimatum when he did not have very much leverage. And this is what happens when you do that. So what I would hope to see is just that everyone gets over fucking COVID derangement syndrome. I hope that Joe Rogan goes back to talking about DMT and aliens and chimps. And I hope that Neil Young goes back to rocking in the free world or, whatever. I don't know what Neil Young is up to. Remember when he had that like MP3 player that he was selling? I don't remember what it was, but Neil Young, just go back to doing Neil Young things. That's what I think. Those are my thoughts on Neil Young versus Joe Rogan and Spotify. I think it's hilarious that Neil Young took an L on this one, and I hope you're happy. You accomplished nothing. All you did was get your music removed for nothing. Nobody cares. You didn't stick it to Joe Rogan or stick it to Spotify. All you did was make it more difficult for your fans to listen to your music. So congratulations.